Hey, Talo Falava. Leotawa Dr. John Peterson here with TE2 Edge Sports Cards. Good morning and happy blessed Sunday to all out there. Hope you have had a good weekend so far. Thought I'd step on the, or step up to the table here, or sit up to the table and do an episode of what I'm calling TE2 Edge Sports Cards on the table, or just on the table with TE2 Edge Sports Cards. So I was watching a YouTube video this morning while I was taking some photographs of the slabs in the back for this baseball card show that I'd like to set up at in a couple Saturdays. Still not sure if I'm going to be able to get in, but hopefully I can. But I was taking some photographs and cropping, and I was listening to a YouTube channel. Now, I've listened to this channel before, and I've listened to this gentleman, and I really like this guy. And so I want to give a big shout out to the Sports Card Professor. Looks like he's got 782 subscribers. Let's see if we can get him up over 1,000 here in the next couple days, if not week. He just did a video called Rare Cards, The Mistake of Modern Collectors. And so Sports Card Professor, if you're watching this, I definitely would like to invite you to a time where we could both get on screen. I'm trained as a qualitative researcher. I've got a doctorate, and doesn't necessarily mean I know anything more than anybody else, but I have got a lot of training in how to gather stories and share people's perspectives through a qualitative approach. So if that's of interest to you, Sports Card Professor, holler at me. Sounds like your name is Darren. My name's John. Most people call me John here. So I'd like to give a response to the Sports Card Professor through a video format. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to do it while I look at some cards, because I really enjoy looking at cards and opening packs of cards. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to try and do a 2-for-1. I'm going to respond to Darren, okay, and his what he put out on his video. I think it was yesterday, August 27th, if I'm not mistaken. And then I want to open up some packs of this, which I picked up yesterday, 30 bucks, not bad. 1996 Bazooka Major League Baseball bubblegum cards. Features baseball's biggest stars. Of course, there's Griffey and Frank Thomas, but I'm also going to see if I can pick up a Derek Jeter out of these packs. So let me open this up. Oh, and I'd be remiss if I didn't introduce my friends that I have here with me today. We've got a couple of folks from the 1952 Top Set. Left to right, we've got the big clue, Ted Kluszewski. Love Ted Kluszewski. I can see he's got his shirt, his half shirt or three-quarter shirt underneath his jersey this time, which wasn't always the case. He had big arms, big strong guy, lefty. We've got Orestes Minoso, otherwise known as Mini Minoso. Geez, what can I say about Mini Minoso? Recently made the Hall of Fame, and super excited about that. Played many, many years in the major leagues, and well-deserved Hall of Famer. To the right of Mini, we've got the Bullet Bob Feller, amazing ace pitcher from the 30s and the 40s and a little bit in the 50s with the Cleveland Indians. Man, Feller, wow. Won a World Series in 54, I know for sure. Pretty sure the Cleveland Indians won a World Series in 54. And they called him, I think his nickname was the Bullet. They called him Bullet Bob Feller because he threw so hard. His fastball was clocked in at well over 100 miles an hour many times. And then the Duke of Flatbush, we've got Duke Snider on the right there. Won't say a whole lot about him, but played center field for the Dodgers and all-time great center fielder. All right, so now that I've properly introduced my friends and I've properly introduced the topic for on the table here today, let's get this box open and pull out a few of these packs. I don't think I'm going to open up every pack. Oh, I can already tell there's gum in these packs. All right, let me slide this box to the side. So before we get started with the packs, I wanted to talk a little bit about the premise of what the Sports Card Professor, what he was talking about. And I don't want to try and rehash everything he said, because I definitely want you to go to his channel and and hear what he had to say directly from him. So that's why I think it's important that you check out his video. But just in summary, a couple things. One, he talks about the notion of rarity. What does it mean to be rare? And he brings up the word iconic. What does it mean for something to be iconic? He talks about a potential reckoning coming, all right, for sports cards. Very interesting concept, a reckoning. And then he also talks about distinct eras for sports cards, sports card collecting. So those would be 4 kind of big ideas that he throws out there in his video. And I'm not going to go into in-depth analysis of what he said. I want to share with you kind of what my response is to what he said. So a couple of things you need to know about me. I've been collecting sports cards since I was about 5 years old. I was born in 1974, which makes me 47, 48, going on 48. I started off with 1980, I'd say 80 tops. That summer was the first summer that I started buying cards, or my dad and mom bought cards for me. I bought more in 81, and then by 1982 I was pretty full on buying my own packs of cards, and they were mostly tops. I bought a few Donruss and a few Fleer, but mostly stuck to tops. 82 was the year the Milwaukee Brewers went to the World Series. They won the American League pennant, and so that was a really big deal in Wisconsin for Wisconsin sports fans and Brewers fans. I distinctly remember that time period being a really, really special time period. Harvey's Wallbangers, Robin Yount, Gorman Thomas, and that whole crew, Cecil Cooper, Ted Simmons, Don Sutton, Raleigh Fingers. It was just an amazing, amazing team. And even though they didn't win, I love my Brewers and always will. By the mid-'80s, I was really, really heavily buying cards. I would have an allowance and I would buy cards and that sort of thing. And then by the time it got to the junk wax era, I would say I tapped out on cards probably right around 1992-93. This was right around my senior year of high school. I had a girlfriend. I played sports. I played football in the fall. I played basketball in the winter, and then baseball in the spring, and then Legion ball in the summer. So I played sports, 4 different seasons of sports. I was all conference in a couple of sports, and overall just had a really great experience as a student athlete growing up in Menominee, Wisconsin, which big props to Menominee. Love Menominee, even though I don't get back a ton. A lot of great people in that town. And then I went to college and played college basketball for a couple of years, and I didn't do anything with sports cards. Really, I didn't do anything with sports cards until the late 90s, early 2000s. In the late 90s and the 2000s, I jumped back in, and I started buying wax at a place in downtown Minneapolis from a gentleman who now owns Ultimate Collectibles in Hopkins. And his name is Shane. I was really interested in some of the players from the 2000-2001 era. And I'd be lying if I didn't tell you that one of the players that really I was interested in getting some cards for was Joe Mauer. And I won't go into a big thing about Joe Mauer, but folks who know Joe Mauer know that he came from St. Paul, Twin Cities area. He was a Creighton-Durham Hall graduate. I think he was all-state first team in, 3 different sports. He was first team all-state quarterback. He was first team all-state basketball. And then it was first team all-state baseball. So when Joe got drafted, I definitely wanted to get a couple of his rookie cards, and in the process I learned more about Pujols and Suzuki and all those guys from the early 2000s. Between 2000, I want to say 2 and maybe 2010, I had another kind of dry period where I didn't really buy any cards. So, I went, I would say from 92, 93 to 2000, about 7 years without buying any cards. And then bought a few cards in 99, 2000, 2001. And then in 2002, stopped buying cards, was really traveling a lot. I was a teacher for 8 years, and before I was an administrator in education for 13. And really what I did is I spent my money traveling the United States and going out west and to the mountains, and just living as a mid-20s, late 20s bachelor, pretty much, before I met my wife, Michael. So all that being said, by 2010, 2011, 2012, I started dipping back into cards a little bit. I did have some vintage cards. I had, of course, some junk wax too. Had some newer cards from the early 2000s. But just started going to shows, and I went to the Twin Cities Sports Cards Collectibles show pretty much, I don't know, I'd say maybe on a quarterly basis, 4, maybe 5 times a year. And particularly what I was looking for was vintage. So I'd go and I'd look for vintage deals, and usually from the same 2 or 3 vintage dealers. I'd go to Steve's Table, Steve Forsberg, and a couple other gentlemen that I get my vintage cards from. So slowly but surely, I would buy a couple cards here, buy a couple cards there. Well, fast forward to 2018, I left my position as an executive director with St. Paul Public Schools. Had been in education for, almost 20 years at that point, and had done pretty much every job I could do with the exception of superintendent. I got my doctorate in 2017. I got my master's in 2009. Licensed as a superintendent, principal, and still licensed as a K-12 teacher with emphasis in history, social studies, and Spanish. I speak some Spanish and have taught Spanish in the past. So all that being said, I started my own business, and just in the last year, I decided that I wanted to fold sports cards into my business strategy. Now, I'm a strong collector. Y'all know that. I love to collect, and ultimately, that's where my heart is. But without going into a ton of detail about the business side of things, I also decided to do sports cards as a business for a couple of different reasons, which I won't share here, but I can share on another video. All right, so what I've just done is I've set context. All right, you might think to yourself, well, why in the heck is this guy sharing all this stuff about himself before he starts talking about his response to the sports card professor? And part of it is because I want you to know a little bit about who I am and where I come from. Because who we are and where we come from matters. It matters a lot, actually. It helps to define who we are. And it's important for each of us to share. Look at that. Little bazooka pack. It's pretty cool. I think it's important for us to see each other for who we say we are, right? People have perceptions about who you are. But is that accurate and in line with who you really are? So that's why context is so important. There's a Brian Jordan. He was a 2-sport athlete, pro athlete. So that being said, that context really matters. And I think one of the things that the sports card professor was saying is that a lot of the ultra modern cards from 2020 to now, they have a different and unique context that is distinct from the period prior to 2020 all the way back to 94, 93, and 81, right? So you've got ultra modern, which goes back to around 2020. Then you've got modern, which basically goes from 2020 to 1980. Okay, so that's a pretty big span, but within that modern era, you've got sub eras, right? So you've got that time period between 2020 and 2010, where things were pretty quiet in the sports card hobby. Things hadn't changed a ton. There wasn't a whole lot of injection of new people and ideas and big money and what we know to be sports cards today. And then you had the junk wax era, which some will say is like 87, 88, up to like the mid 90s, 93, 94, somewhere there. I see varying perspectives on when the start date and end date is for the junk wax era. Some people say it's 88 to 92. Some people say it's 87. Is 1987 Topps junk wax? Yeah, 1987 Topps is junk wax. Is 1986 Topps junk wax? That's a good question. Don't know. How about 94, 95 Topps? Not sure. So I just know that the junk wax era is that kind of area that is, late 80s, early 90s, in there. Excuse me. Prior to the junk wax era, you have a short period of time in the modern era that goes back to 1980. And then prior to 1980, you have vintage. And then vintage is broken up into its own separate chunks. You've got vintage that goes to cards that were printed before World War or after World War II. And then moving even further back, you've got the pre-war era cards, which were cards that were printed before World War II. Right, World War II for the United States started with the bombing of Pearl Harbor in December, maybe December 7th. I could be wrong on the exact date, but in December of 1941. So, and then probably within the pre-war era, I'm not an expert by any means. I don't even own any pre-war cards. There are probably different eras, little sub-eras within pre-war. So laying out that entire timeline, you have different sets of context for each era, okay? Different reasons why people make meaning and how they make meaning of the cards. All right, and it changes depending on the time period that you personally collect, okay? So one of the things that I think is that you have to do what you love. You have to do what you love when it comes to cards. That's a really important piece. So if you really love collecting vintage cards, then I firmly think you should collect vintage cards. I don't think there's anybody out there that would disagree with me about doing what you love when it comes to cards. Also, I think it's important for people to remember that some people have ideas about what's going to happen with the value of the cards. So Chipper Jones there, it's a nice card. I should pull that Chipper Jones out. Should pull a Ripken out too. Know that some people really truly do collect just to collect, and some people collect because they want to sell the cards at some point and maybe make some money off of them, or recoup their investment, maybe at the minimum. And I think what Sports Card Professor is saying is that we have to be careful and aware of what it means when something is defined as rare. All right, just because something is one of one doesn't mean that it's rare. In fact, I don't even own a single one of one card. I don't look to buy one of one cards. Now again, I'm not saying that it's negative to have a one of one card. I'm not saying that at all. It's just not my thing. I suspect that one of one cards are not nearly as rare as some people make them out to be, like the companies. If there's one base card and 100 one of ones of variations of that same base card, that to me isn't rare. It's not rare, because rare to me means that there is a particular way that the numeric value of the card has been derived. That means that there's scarcity. And even though a one of one might be rare, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's scarce, right? If there's and also too, if there's only one of one, but everyone's got a one of one, then how does that work? Right? I'd rather have, like the Sports Card Professor said, a one of five. I would say a one of five is more scarce than a one of one if there's 100 one of ones. So that's one thing. Those are Pedro. So we've talked a little bit about the eras. I agree with him on that. We've talked a little bit about what rarity is. To me, rarity also is like, is it recognizable? So like when you look at that 1952 Topps Bob Feller, that's an iconic. It's not the most iconic, but that is one of the more iconic Bob Feller cards out there because of the 52 context. Right, the 52 top set is one of the most famous sets, and I mean, is it the most famous set in all of baseball cards? I would say it's right up there. If it's not the most famous set, probably is the most famous set. So there are iconic images from that set because of the context that was set by the 1952 season of baseball and the 1951 season, which those stats reflect, but also the way the images show up in people's minds. So I look at that Bob Feller card, and to me, it is iconic. And even though there are multiple copies of that same card that people own, it is a scarce card because of the age of the card and because of the low print run numbers. It's not scarce because it's a one of one, right? If that were the only Bob Feller card that existed of 1952 tops, yeah, it would be rare and it would be scarce, but that's not what defines the card to me. What defines the card to me is that it's set within a context of 1952 tops baseball cards, of which you've got the Mays and the Mantle and the Jackie Robinson and that sort of thing. A lot of these ultra-modern cards, they're out of context. They're almost like anomalies or like anachronisms. They're a little bit anachronistic because they're sitting in a sea or an ocean of cards that are in many ways out of context. Now, I know that might be hard for some folks to hear because they've probably invested a lot of time, energy, and money into purchasing ultra-modern cards. But to me, in 20 years, a lot of these ultra-modern cards are going to be absolutely worthless. I'm going to say that again. In 20 years, and I don't mean to be rude, and I don't mean to be mean, but I'm telling you that my personal feeling, when I walk through a card show and I see all these ultra-modern cards, they all look the same to me. I don't see any variation or difference in them. There's so much variation that there's no variation. I don't know if that makes sense. And to me, that makes them not a good thing to collect for me personally, and not a good thing to invest in. So do I have some ultra-modern cards? I do. I have a few ultra-modern basketball cards. But the ultra-modern basketball cards that I have are all gem mints or pristines. So I don't touch any ultra-modern basketball that's not gem mint or pristine. And they're all on CSG slabs. I don't touch the PSA slabbed ultra-modern basketball cards just because I don't think that they're going to be worth a lot. One, you're dealing with manufactured scarcity, the prefabricated scarcity, and you're also dealing with print numbers that are really high, that we don't really know exactly what the print numbers are. I suspect that they're higher than we like to admit in the hobby. And then I don't like the way some of them look. They're too flashy. They're too shiny. I'd prefer this look, which is an authentic, classic look. To me, that's what I like. And that's not to say that if you like ultra modern that I'm down on you. I'm not. I'm just saying that the sports card professor's point is that it's not rare if there's 500 101s that are based off of the same base card. I agree with him 100%. And we are headed for a reckoning, because so much money has now been poured into ultra modern cards that we're gonna head for a crash. Baseball cards, sports cards is mostly an unregulated market. And what that means is that there really isn't a state function or a state structure regulating sports cards as a market. The regulation of the market comes directly from the market. It comes from the way people consume the cards, and it comes from the way that the manufacturers produce the cards. So if we really want to have an impact on what happens with sports cards in an unregulated market, it falls on the consumer side. Are there consumer protections in sports cards from a state perspective? No, not really. I mean, I suppose the FBI could get involved if you were in some, high-level scheming around cards, defrauding the government potentially, which is never a good thing to do. But just from a consumer perspective, I don't see there being state regulations, state regulatory functions, and I'm talking about like state or local government outside of taxes, in the card industry, in the hobby. So in the absence of that, you're going to see some different types of strange behaviors. And a lot of the fraud that we see in the industry, oh, there's the Jeter. Look at that. That's what I'm looking for right there. Now, what's the pop count on this? I don't know, but I don't care because I love Jeter because he's iconic. Jeter is iconic. His cards are iconic. His cards from the 90s to me are iconic. Partly because he was a Yankee, partly because he won the World Series, 5 times with his teams, and partly just because of the way he provided leadership to his organization. So to me, Jeter is not a one of one. Even though there's lots of his cards out there, his 90s cards, I collect them because they have an iconic look and feel to them. So yeah, I wanted this card, and that's why I bought this box for $30 because I'm chasing this card. Jeter reminds me more of an old school player from the vintage era than he does of a player from the ultra modern era. He's got an iconic feel. When I see him play and watch him play and I hear him speak, he reminds me of an older time when just an older time in the sport. So I don't know. I think we are headed for a reckoning, and the bubble will burst. It usually does. And when the bubble bursts and a lot of people get burned, that's when you're going to see some more regulations step in. Baseball cards, sports cards right now kind of remind me of the gas industry from the late 70s and early 80s in the United States. It was pretty much an unregulated market, and it was that way for quite a while, up through the 80s. And then when you saw the prices of gas and natural gas go way up, that's when you saw the federal government step in. So Sarbanes-Oxley, which is a financial piece of legislation that is the result of the 2008. Is it 2008, or maybe it was prior to 2008? I just know that when Enron went down, there was significant, and that was in the late 90s, early 2000s. Enron was a big utility company, gas company, based out of Texas. When they went down, there were a whole bunch of regulations that were put in place because so many people lost money. Investors, stockholders. So at some point, if cards can't get regulated on its own, it's going to be regulated by the government. And I don't know how people feel about that. That might be kind of a drag. I mean, let's protect the hobby right now. And, have it still be about what it should be about, which is having fun, collecting what you love. Kenny Lofton. And treating it with respect. Treating the hobby with some measure of respect. Some of these older cats that are doing YouTube, listen to them. They know what they're talking about. These guys that have been collecting for 40 plus years, 40, 50, 60 years, they've seen the peaks and the valleys in the industry. These guys that have owned shops going back to like the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s, listen to what they have to say, because as I'm watching these YouTube videos, I'm sensing some nervousness from different folks doing content, and frankly, I can't blame them. The amount of money that people are spending on these quote unquote rare cards that are ultra modern, I don't think it's sustainable. And where they're getting their money, I have my suspicions. I think what's happened with some of these cats is that they've gone out and gotten business lines of credit. And there's nothing wrong with getting a business. I've got business lines of credit. I'm a business owner. One of the best parts about having a business line of credit is that when you get that credit, typically there's a grace period where you don't pay any interest. And so, if you get a business line of credit, you've got a good credit score, a good credit rating, you can get, a line, and they might not ask you to pay any interest on that line for the first 18 to 24 months of having the line open. So I suspect what some of these cats are doing is they're getting business lines of credit because they've started their own businesses. And they're going out and buying cards. And they're speculating on cards. Now, do I do some speculating on cards? You better believe I do. I'm a business owner. You have to do some speculation if you're going to be owning a business. If you want to make a profit, or you want to break even minimally and not lose money as a business owner, then you do have to do some speculating. You have to take some calculated risks. With that said, what you speculate on matters. So for example, I'm not going to speculate on Sammy Sosa cards. It's too high risk. Does he have some nice rookie cards? Yeah, his 1990 Leaf is a nice rookie card. But I'm not going to go out and buy a whole bunch of Sammy Sosa rookie cards because there are questions about whether or not he's going to get in the Hall of Fame. And you all know as well as I do that getting in the Hall of Fame matters for baseball cards, especially for their value. So I don't plan to start investing heavily in Sammy Sosa cards anytime soon. And I think you could say the same thing for Clemens, and you could say the same thing to some extent for Barry Bonds. Oh, there's a Piazza. So part of it too is around liquidity. So like, how liquid is the card? Like, is it something that you can move? Or is it something that you could end up getting stuck with? Here's the thing about liquidity. If you invest in something that you're not worried about getting stuck with because you really truly enjoy it, like a 1952 Mini Minoso, a 1952 Bob Feller, I'll die with those cards. I'm ride or die with vintage, both as a collector and as an investment. Maybe we should start a YouTube group called the Vintage Ride or Die. You could count me in on it. Because if I sell my vintage, I'm going to sell it at a price point that I'm comfortable with. I'm not going to sell it for less than what I think it's worth to me. And that goes above and beyond what the market value is, right? I'm not necessarily looking for only a return on investment. I'm looking to be accounted for in terms of what I've collected and what I've done to curate and keep the memory of these players and these cards alive. And that to me is worth a lot. So, you come to my Slabs page, you're going to see some higher prices for vintage, especially the higher quality stuff in terms of condition. My ungraded stuff, I tend to try and keep higher quality ungraded stuff. And yeah, you're going to pay a premium for that if you want to have it. In terms of the ultra modern stuff, though, I can let that go at any time. As long as you're willing to pay what's fair market value for the ultra modern cards that I have, which there aren't a ton, I'm happy to let those go. Because there are so many of them that have been printed that they're not iconic. I mean, let me give you an example. What is the iconic LaMelo Ball rookie card? Put it in the comment. If you're into ultra modern basketball, what is the most iconic LaMelo Ball rookie card? If there's more than 3 examples, it's not iconic. That particular card you said is iconic is not iconic. Sorry, hate to tell you, hate to tell you, burst your bubble. What is the most iconic Patrick Mahomes rookie card? No idea. I don't even own a Patrick Mahomes card, right? But if you've got more than, there's another Jeter, sweet. If you own, if there's a Griffey, beautiful. Griffey's swing is iconic. That's why I love Griffey, right? The way his swing is photographed, iconic. That's why Griffey cards are always going to be of value, even the ones that were mass produced. Plus he didn't use roids. He wasn't a juicer. So people respect that. And his stats will stand the test of time. Do I think Bonds should be in the Hall? Yeah, I do. Do I think he should be recognized as the home run leader? No, I don't. I think it should be Hank Aaron. I think there should be an asterisk next to his stats. And the asterisk on the bottom should be connected to a key that says used roids, or these stats were compiled and accumulated during a time period when he used steroids. Because we know that Bonds didn't use steroids his whole career. Just look at the pictures. For anyone that's taken creatine, you know what I'm talking about. There's pre-creatine and there's post-creatine. When I took, there's another Jeter. It's 3 Jeters. When I took creatine back in the mid-90s, it was the summer of 1996, I beefed up. Definitely beefed up. But it also wasn't healthy for me. I got really strong. I was bench pressing 225, I don't know, sets of 8, 10, you know? So that's 225, 8 times, 225, another 8 times, and 225, another 8 times. And I was able to put some weight up there on the old bench press. But it hurt my shoulders eventually. So there you go. There's a cost with everything. So when it comes to the card hobby right now, the industry, the market, whatever you want to call it, I guess the hobby is different from the industry, and the industry is different from the market. You have to be smart, and you have to watch, and you have to learn and listen. And so listen to the sports card professor. Listen to what he has to say. Listen to John Mangini. Listen to Elite Hunters. Listen to these heads that have been around. Not just like me, where I was in and out. You know, I was hardcore sports card collecting from 1980 to 1993, but then I was gone for 7 years. I'll bet you John Mangini was not. I bet you John Mangini has been collecting cards for his entire life without pause. So, and I'm not a John Mangini fanboy. I just think that some of the older dudes that are into vintage know what they're talking about more than some of the ultra modern cats, right? So be careful out there. Be careful what you spend your money on. Diversify your portfolio. If you're only into vintage, I think you're going to be okay. But you might want to, you know, dip your toe into a little bit of ultra modern just to stay relevant, right? Because that's what the kids are collecting, is the new stuff. You know, I don't know a whole lot of kids that are 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 years old that are going out and collecting vintage. Man, they ain't never heard of Bob Feller, right? That's why it's important that we teach them. We got to teach the youth. Like Peter Tosh once said, you can't blame the youth of today when they don't know. It's our job to teach them, right? So we've got to teach them about players like Duke Snyder, Ted Kluszewski, Minnie Minoso, Bob Feller, you know, even the common players. You know, we need to teach them about guys like Eddie Yost, right? What a great card. I'm not an expert on Eddie Yost, but let's teach them who these guys are. Whitey Ford, Larry Doby. You know, we can't be mad at them if they don't know, if we don't teach them. You know, they're going to collect what is put in front of them because they're young. And that's what they see on TV. When they see Anthony Edwards do a tomahawk dunk, they want to go out and buy the Anthony Edwards rookie card. Can you blame them? No. When I saw the Milwaukee Brewers make it to the 1982 World Series, you better believe in 1983, I was trying to get as many Milwaukee Brewer cards as I could get. That's the way it works. That is the way it works, folks. And if you're comfortable with holding forever and ever and ever and going to your grave with ultra-modern cards, then you're money. You're money. And if you don't care, if you spend $100,000 on ultra-modern cards and they're only worth $1,000 in 20 years because you're going to your grave with those cards, come hell or high water, then you're money. But if you're not, if you're spending $100,000 on one card and in 20 years that card only is worth like $1,000, be careful. You could be influencing other people to do the same, and that's not necessarily a cool thing. There's a Puckett. Puckett is iconic. Get on my back. 1991 Game 6. Get on my back. That is iconic, right? That I can say to you as a person who lives in Minnesota, Kirby Puckett will always be legend in Minnesota because of the things that he did on the baseball field. He'll always be legend. He is iconic. His cards are iconic. Now, which card is iconic for Kirby Puckett? Well, I think it's the 84 Fleer. Traded, update, whatever they call it. Fleer update. I think it's his 85 Topps. I think it's his 85 Donruss. You know, I think it's his, Fleer from 1984. That's the iconic Kirby Puckett rookie card. I can tell you definitively there are 3 or 4 rookie cards of Kirby Puckett that if you're a Kirby Puckett fan, you must have those cards. All right. What's the iconic LaMelo Ball rookie card? Shoot. Ain't nobody going to be able to answer that question. You know what? Everybody will be able to answer the question. That's the problem with it. Everyone will answer, and all the answers will be different. That means there's no reliability. Reliability is about hitting the same mark multiple times, right? Validity is hitting the correct mark. It's accuracy. It's hitting the bullseye. So if you have validity and reliability in a response, you're doing pretty good. Meaning, everybody knows what the 1984 and Card Professor talks about this. Everybody knows the 1984 Dan Marino rookie card. Why? Because there's only one. So if somebody says, oh, it's this 1986 Topps green with white striped candy cane rookie card for Dan Marino. Nope, sorry, that's his third year card. His rookie card is 84 Topps. It's the only rookie card of Marino that exists. Right? And you can ask anybody who grew up during that time period and they can tell you with reliability and validity, consistency and accuracy, what his rookie card is. Right now in ultra modern cards, we don't have reliability and consistency. Therefore, the value of the cards will suffer over time because they're out of context and they're not scarce. They might be a version of rare, but they're not scarce. So word to you all is collect what you love, do what you do, be smart about how you make your decisions, whether you're collecting to collect or whether you're collecting to invest. But let's not kid ourselves about the reality of where things are heading, which I do agree with the sports card professor. We are heading for a reckoning. All right, that's all I got for you. Happy Bazooka. Peace out. One love.